All right, welcome back. This is the Something Venture podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. My guest today is Paul-Henri Ferrand. How are you doing?
Great.
Thank you so much for doing this. You go by PH, right?
I go by PH, yeah.
So PH is the COO of Brex, which is a amazingly fast-growing company here in Silicon Valley. They do corporate cards for growing companies. That's things like e-commerce, startups, and life sciences. Before that, he was president of global customer operations at Google Cloud and the president of Dell North America. So your career's not going too well. Is that the deal?
Well, actually, I would say I've been with a lot of big corporations in the past. Yeah. AT&T, Nokia, Dell, and the likes. And I think it was time for me to check, what it is to be in a smaller outfit and really understand what is a rocket ship like Brex. And
that's
I
right.
really like it.
Well, your other companies were rocket ships too at one point.
No, they were indeed. But I have to say that whenever I joined them, whether it's Nokia or Google, that those companies were already like multi-billion dollars outfits. So it's pretty different to be in a startup now.
So what was your path coming from, coming from France, apparently, judging by your accent and by your name? How do you make your way to Dell is in Texas, right? Like, what is the trajectory that takes you to get
It's
there?
kind of interesting. So first, I graduated with a master in computer science, and because of that, I did an internship at one stage a long time ago with a company called Bridge Communications. You may recall them, and they got bought by 3Com. But so I was in the Silicon Valley in the 80s. Okay. I don't know if you can believe this. And then from there, I really got a knack for the U.S. and I wanted to come back. And I did serve at the French Embassy in Washington D.C. like a couple of years later. Got hired by AT&T to start their office in France, and here for 10 years I was with AT&T, traveling between France and the U.S., working out of our New York offices, and that's how I got really to become more like a global citizen, and operating on 3 continents over the past 25 years.
Yeah, and so you make your way to Dell. And you become president of Dell US, right?
Well, not really. So I was in Asia Pacific with Nokia, and I was based in Singapore at that time. And I ran into an amazing gentleman by the name of Bill Emilio, who was the president of Dell APJ,
right.
And fantastic person who hired me into Dell. And over the 10 years at Dell, I got to know, of course, Michael pretty well, and I got to climb the ladder, became the CMO of the Consumer Small Business. And then Michael asked me to come to Texas and really handle a software and peripherals business units before becoming the president of Dell North America.
Right. And how does Google then happen? I mean, Dell is kind of a hardware company.
Yeah.
And off you go to Google. Yeah.
So I think if I look back at my career at every point in time when I changed, I was really interested in learning something new. As I moved off from AT&T to join Alcatel, was to build the first new smartphones or web phone at that time, a long time ago. And so, when after 10 years at Dell, it was time for me to reevaluate what I wanted to do. I could clearly see that cloud was going to happen. I could clearly see mobile was going to happen. I could clearly see that a company called Google was really starting to make a lot of inroads in the enterprise business. So I at that point, actually, I wanted to become more like a CEO or CEO of a small outfit, but someone reached out to me and asked me whether or not I would be interested in joining Google, and here I go. I met with a bunch of people there. I was really impressed. I think 5 years ago, it's still now, but Google was such a magical company that I kind of felt I couldn't pass on this opportunity.
Yeah. And what was it like? What was the culture of Google like versus the sort of, not to harp on tech, like the Texas-based Dell and the Silicon Valley, hardware, and then the Silicon Valley-based software? What was was it culture shock, or was it just something different?
It was a culture shock. I think those companies are very, very different. They're both very successful. I think what I've learned at Dell was really ruthless execution. Yeah. It was a low margin and fast-paced environment. And as I joined Google, I had to really rewire myself. First, it's a company that is attracting amazing talent, and as someone puts it, companies make you a manager, but people makes you a leader. And so at Google, what was working differently from Dell is, as a leader, you had to attract talent, right? So that's one thing that I learned quite a lot at the beginning. The second piece was that Google was all about growth. When I joined day one, I was asking where is my where is my budget? And people are just kind of laughing at me. And how do you do pricing? And they're like, pricing is done, by auction. So really what you have to care about is growth, and growth is solving all problems. So that was a very, very different environment for me. But, it took me about 6 months to a year to adapt, and I really enjoyed it.
It's interesting. People talk about, I have friends who are executives at both Apple and Amazon.
Yeah.
And the Amazon ones, their culture is cut every penny, build your desk out of a door kind of thing. Even though they're well-paid execs, that's how they think. Apple, the cash just sort of flows. I mean, they're smart about it, but the cash just flows so freely that it's sort of more about the creativity and the growth and the, where do you put the cash, basically.
Yeah, I think it's kind of similar at Google, although I would say it's much harder than what people think. Cash is flowing, but cash is actually allocated to the best opportunities. And so what I would say you learn at Google is to think big. You're looking at, what is the blue ocean you can go after. And you're really trying to understand, how you can grow way, way faster than anybody else in the marketplace. And that's hard to do. So I wouldn't say free flow and, everybody can do whatever they want. I mean, there's a lot of metrics, but the metrics are oriented towards growth and not so much towards optimizing the bottom line.
Right. I think people, since you're not physically, in earlier companies that I had, you would go and help the engineers rack servers in a in a co-location facility, and now people are so disconnected from the cloud that I'm not sure a lot of people know the scale of the thing. Like, how many servers have been put up by Google this morning? Like hundreds, probably today, right?
Yeah. So the magnitude of the cloud is usually totally under evaluated, I think underassessed. I think that, or underestimated, sorry. Over the past 3 years, Google invested up to $30 billion, right, in the infrastructure. And so $30 billion investment is massive, right?
Yes.
And the infrastructure has continued to grow since I left 9 months ago. So I can't tell you where they are right now. But, it's a network that is carrying more than 40% of the internet traffic worldwide. Great. So this is really, really massive, right? And so it's hard for people to really understand what this means, but it's completely changing the way IT and information technologies is basically working today.
And what is the state of the sort of cloud competition? There's Microsoft Azure, there's AWS sort of surprised everybody because they didn't report it for years, and all of a sudden it was this massive business. And then, of course, Google's what's the sort of state of the competition? Is it going to be 3 people competing, or?
Well, I think you can say that obviously AWS was ahead of everybody, right? They convinced the developers to go and adopt their technology, and that's why they're so much ahead, and giving Jeff Bezos 8 years of lead time is not necessarily a very smart thing to do, but it is what it is. When actually Google invented pretty much the internet back in the year 2000, so I would say AWS and Microsoft, given their their footprint in the enterprise, are definitely 2 clear leaders. But I would say that Google, with the technology that they have, with the network that they have, with the engineers that they have, is a very, very close number 3. You can dismiss, the Chinese with Alibaba. I mean, they will have probably a little bit more problems to become dominant in the Western world. But, China is becoming, as is the number 2, number 2 economy in the world, and they're dominating Asia. So I would say those 4 are definitely the 4 key players I see in the world. And because it's a capital sort of very intensive, capital intensive business, it's going to be very hard to see others emerge on the infrastructure level, right?
Right.
But if you're looking then at the SaaS level, like, with the Salesforce of the world, the Snowflake of the world, and so on, you can start seeing a lot of other outfits, kind of growing very, very rapidly. So I think the game is now going to be played at the SaaS level, and I think at the infrastructure level, you probably have those four I just cited.
Right. So you're at the top. I mean, Google is one of the most probably incredible value creating companies in history, certainly one of the most valuable central companies on the planet. You're near the top of this company, and a startup comes calling. Brex, somebody calls you up and says, hey, you need to leave the most amazing job in the world because of this. What was the path that took you to this? I mean, it's not two kids in a garage, but took you from Google to something like Brex.
Yeah, I think it's hard to leave Google, and I'd been at Google for 5 years, and you don't leave a company like that suddenly, and it takes some time for you to think about it. But I've always been curious, and I think something has been driving me along my career is learning, right? So when I joined Google, I wanted to learn. I was curious about like what what's this thing. I certainly got approached by a couple of VCs out there, and I started to see one trend, which in my view is super important, which is that the cloud is starting to change completely what's happening across every industry. And that sounds like, one thing I'm saying that is probably not a brand new, but the fact of the matter, retail has been completely upended by Amazon and by the cloud. And I think that it's happening across the board. What I figured is actually there's one industry where this hasn't happened yet completely, and that's the financial industry. Mm-hmm. And so when Brex knocked at the door, I was like, in corporate card for a startup, kind of interesting, kind of neat, right? But not as big as I thought it would be. And as I sat down with Enrique de Burgas and Pedro Franceschi, the two co-founders, who are Brazilians, by the way, I got totally enticed by their vision and what they wanted to accomplish. And throughout, months of discussion, I started to be really, really excited about what we could be doing together in that space. And that's how I joined Brex.
And how did the two Brazilians, the founders, how did they get to this point? How did they? What is their story of founding Brex and bringing it? It doesn't seem obvious that there was space for a new kind of credit card for startups or for anything, but obviously there was. Like, what did they see?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're just two amazing individuals. I have to say that you get to meet such people once in a lifetime, and they remind me a little bit about Larry and Sergey, although I don't know Larry and Sergey personally. But I think, this quest for something, an ideal world, the quest for innovation, they really started very early. Pedro started to code when he was 9, and he jailbroke, the iPhone. So this is kind of like those two really understand technology, but not just that, they got a knack for business. They created 2 companies before creating the third one, Brex. Paul-Henri is one of the companies they formed in Brazil, which was really successful and had to sell. And then they decided that they wanted to go to Stanford, so they went to Stanford. Not easy. When you know how hard it is to get into Stanford, and pretty much got bored pretty quickly and wanted to form another company. I think what I see in them is a vision. I see in them a drive and an amazing ability to gather great talent around a project like what they've formed. And they have so much understanding of the payment industry that I think their vision is quite amazing. And frankly, Brex wants to become, the global financial standard for growing businesses. And I think we're on our way to make that happen.
And are they the ones who? So I've just gotten my first Brex card.
Yeah.
And were they the ones who designed it? It was a lovely. I don't know why, but just signing up for it was a lovely experience. Like, it was just.
Yeah,
really
so
well.
You probably got it before I joined. I have to tell you, I'm impressed because in the 2 years of forming this company, they have achieved something amazing. We can't reveal numbers, but we have an amazing product. I think this product has really addressed unmet needs in the marketplace. So it's really a corporate card for a startup where you don't need any personal guarantee, where it's instant approval and so on and so forth. And as they did this, they realized that there were also other needs across other verticals that they could start addressing. And they started to address the needs across e-com, for example. So we have a card for e-com customers. And the growth has been phenomenal. I have to say that they're very focused on the customer, which is really something that I think we're very proud at Brex. And so our customer service is probably one of the best in the market. Our NPS is way, way, way above any of our competitors' NPS. And so I'm happy that you're a good customer, but it requires a lot of focus every day.
Yeah, I don't know why. Like I wasn't expecting it to be a good experience or not a good experience. I assumed it would work, but when I was done, I was like, wow, that was a pretty nice deal.
Yeah, and I think what you probably are experiencing is that the workflow or how you're using your card and how you report your expenses is very, very, very modern. And so we believe that compared to all the traditional banking systems in place, this is what really get customers to want to join Brex. Not just the card, but how you are using the card, how you're administering the card. As for myself, I've always had problems reporting my expenses. Yeah. I do it on the go. I just take a picture, just attach it to my transactions, and here you go.
Yeah,
it's
that's
done.
great. Yeah, I realize I have it set up. It sends me a little text message, like as soon as I buy something, and it comes within. I'm signing the receipt and the text message comes. Oh, that's great, and that's a great like fraud prevention thing. I was like, oh, this is like a lovely experience.
It's supposed to work that way.
Yeah. How do you work with them? I mean, Larry and Sergey famously had their CEO that they formed a kind of troika around, and I don't know how that worked. It was a committee, but how do you work with the founders?
Well, I have to tell you the story here is that it took quite a long time for me to join, and for good reason, because it was a big role for them, and so they scrutinized me.
Sure.
They probably know more things about me than I know about myself, and I was very impressed by that process. But I knew that I was not going to join a startup unless I was going to be able to click with the founders. And I clicked with them quite a bit. First, I'm French, they're Brazilian. I think there's something about like how they think about people, how they think about life, which is very important. The intangible is really, really important in the relationship. They're very transparent. I mean, if you're thinking about Brex, one thing I could say as part of our culture is to be very, very transparent. And I'm usually a very transparent, direct kind of person. So I think on the personal side, we're definitely getting along very well. And I think on the professional side, I've always been driven by results. Always been like a wanting to absolutely perform to the best possible. And they are the same, right? They're not taking any prisoners. They're constantly innovating, constantly thinking about the next thing. But they're very open, and for founders, to tell you, they have one characteristic that very few founders have: they accept feedback. And this is, in my view, what got me to join, is to say they're amazing because they know that they have to learn, and they are looking at feedback as a way to continuously learn and grow.
Yeah, that is incredibly rare. It's rare to find that combination with the sort of ambition that it takes. Someone like a Travis Kalanick who drove Uber to where it is, billions of dollars in valuation, but probably wasn't the kind of guy who took a lot of feedback.
Yeah, and I think with millennials and everything, that counts. I think when you have leadership that is sort of confident but vulnerable, authentic, it works. And as someone is saying, I think in Silicon Valley, there's a tendency of thinking that companies succeed because of their products. In my view, that's not true. They succeed because of their people, because they hire people who know how to work together to deliver amazing products. And so it's back to this notion of, if you can gather the best people possible, the best team together, you're probably going to win.
Yeah. What does being an immigrant bring to this equation? It's notable that they're from Brazil. It's notable that the Google guys were not, from here. What does that bring to this equation that makes these companies so extraordinary?
I think there's a little bit of the American dream of, my wife is Brazilian, so I understand Brazil a little bit, and I think this is a hard place to operate, right? Even like if you go to another country than the U.S., like even Western countries, it's not as easy to operate as it is in the US. And so you come to the US and you see like this, this possible, flood of capital that you can use. You're able to really find the talent you want. You can set up a company like within minutes, and you have a market. Right? Think about this. You're in a country like Brazil. You have a huge market, but that's the Brazilian market, and that's it. And so when they came to the U.S., it was mostly because they wanted to go to Stanford, but they realized that, wow, we can apply our talent and do something big and global, being in the U.S. And I think today, if you're talking to them, they're probably they feel really that the culture here in the U.S. is the culture that fits their profile even more than any other country. And so I think that's what's attracting immigrants here is the feel like they can really create, innovate, and be themselves here in the U.S.
It's interesting. I had a Brazilian woman named Ba Manuzzi on the podcast, and she came up and just taught herself to manage real estate, like in Sao Paulo, and then moved here, and then somehow ended up in Silicon Valley. She started a venture capital firm, and she started another one. Then she started like a third. She has like 3 venture capital assets under management. Yeah. Like that's not your typical U.S. person. She just had so much hustle from the streets of Sao Paulo that when she got to Miami and then Silicon Valley, she was like, this is nothing compared to.
Yeah, I have to say there's something to be said about having grit. It's very, very, rare to have a success like Pedro and Enrique, where this is their third company and it's a hit. It never happens that way usually, right? You go through a lot of stumbles but I think they have this grit, right? And so back to your question about immigrants, I think they have the grit to continuously try again, and if they make a mistake, continue doing, forging ahead, which I think I can see at Brex. It's successful, but like every startup, we have to pivot, within our grand plan here all the time, to adapt. And I think that's what they are bringing also to the equation.
Do you find you're able to hire employees in an environment where, a good engineer has a lot of opportunities, that you can bring people in who also have grit at the employee level, who can be passionate about what you're doing? Or is it just people being transactional and, whoever's got the better food for lunch and the higher pay?
So I think being able to provide the right environment is necessary but not sufficient. And what I'm saying, the right environment, if it's very hard to compete in Silicon Valley unless you're providing the niceties of that everybody else does provide. But I don't think it's about food or free food or so on and so forth. I think it's about culture. I really believe that culture defines everything within the company. And so if you're looking at Brex again, I believe this is the culture that is holding the team together and that is like making people super excited. Culture and of course the vision, but culture comes first. I think Peter Drucker used to say that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I really believe it. Culture can either destroy your company or it can make your company very, very successful. Strategy, it's not easy. But, it's logical. Culture is, beyond being logical. And this is like what I think Pedro and Enrique are able to do here is like building culture of people like customer focused with an owner's mentality. People are able to think big. And I think this is what is motivating a lot the people every day when they come to work for Brex.
Yeah. And how do you do it? Like as an executive, how do you say, okay, this is what I want our culture to be, and this is how I'm going to make it happen? Is it leading by example? I'm sure that's part of it, but how do you do that?
It's hard. I don't think there's any secret. The one thing I do believe is that, for a big exec, the camera is rolling, and so what you've been always rolling, which means like, setting the example is paramount. I think today people don't believe anyone who is going to say something but do something else. Sure. And so for me, this is really, really important. And we used to wonder at Google whether or not you should keep a genius if that genius was not meeting the cultural values. And people have a different type of idea on this one. My view is like, you shouldn't, right? Even if you got the best genius possible, you should protect the culture. So one is you have to be the guarantor of the culture, and you have to make sure that you're embodying the culture. The second piece, which I think is really important, is to be authentic and vulnerable, to be like everybody else and admit mistakes, and continuously learn and listen. And so this point is super, super important. I think that in today's environment, people follow leaders who are like, of course, amazing, have a great vision, and so on and so forth, but leaders who care, and leaders who can listen and take feedback on board and move on. Once you have that, once you're hiring the right people, once you're setting up, the values, and you're living through the values every day, and this is becoming the foundation of how you lead, I think you can start, saying that you have a good base for building and nurturing a culture within the company. It's hard because it's easy when you're 50, it's harder when you're 100, right. It's very difficult when you're 1,000, and then it's out of your hands sort of, once you get beyond that.
Right.
And so it has to percolate, it has to become, you almost have to have a strategy around your culture and believe in it.
Are all of your employees here in Silicon Valley, or are they around the world?
So we are slightly different from other startups because we've decided from the beginning that we want it to be distributed. And so today, actually, or tomorrow, we're going to announce our Vancouver office. And the reason we're in Vancouver is because it's a great place. You have an amazing tech industry and talent over there. You have immigrants over there. So. Yeah. We think it's going to be amazing. We've started to operate from there, but we're announcing officially today or tomorrow. And so that's how we're kind of we're based in Salt Lake as well. So for a startup our size, after 2 years, it's kind of unique to have this sort of distributed setup. And the reason we're doing this is not that San Francisco is a bad place at all, but it's allowing us to hire talent where talent is. And I think it will allow us to be faster, being able to be global faster. It allows us to also address our expenses, our expense base a little bit better. So it's a little bit harder at the beginning, to be honest with you, but I think it does carry a lot of benefits for us, and it will show in the long term.
By the way, in case anyone missed that, I forgot to mention, Brex was this incredible company at this stage was started 2 years ago,
2 years ago.
That's incredible. What are the challenges? Are there unique challenges to building a culture when you're in multiple cultures in Vancouver and around the world and trying to keep everybody lined up when they're not in the same physical location?
I think it's definitely harder, right? First, you need to have the right technology in place, and we do have great technology today that allows us to keep communicating. It does require for the founders, for myself, and so on to travel and being in those offices. I think back to the point of having values that are very, very clearly outlined and lived by the management is what matters the most. We do run surveys on a quarterly basis to make sure pulse surveys to really understand how the teams are feeling, and we're sharing this openly. So that is helping as well. I think it's been working well for us so far, but I think it's back to this notion of having the values, hiring the right people, and keep representing the culture at the top every day.
You've talked about work and home life kind of blurring a bit. Does that affect how your workforce is operating in this 2020 timeframe?
So work or work-life balance. It's a big topic. I think we are with technology. I think we're evolving very quickly towards a world where work and life, the delineation is blurring very quickly. People work at home or work from home. I work in my Uber. I work, from my bed. I work from the office. So I think we're moving very quickly to much more, a world where people are being defined by the work that they have, the scope that they have, and it's back to management by objectives. It's basically, let's look at the outcome. Let's look at the impact you can have. Much, much more than are you at work or are you, at home. I also believe that we're living in a world where balance is also very, very important. We're running a marathon, not a sprint. And so for me, this is really important that people get a balanced life, and it's up to everyone to decide what is a balanced life. I mean, obviously we're in a startup, so everybody's working super hard. Yeah. But if you work super hard, you need to, keep re-energizing yourself. And so being balanced is also part of what is my job, is to coach people to continuously be balanced in the way they're leading their life.
Is Brex an example of consumerization of IT?
20 years ago, technology started to impact B2C, right? So you started to see technology in the mobile phone when the data center would be totally outdated. And so really what happened over the past 20 years, that technology started to really transform the way consumers operate, but not really how business operates.
Right.
20 years later, cloud is allowing businesses to do what consumers started to do 20 years ago. So if you're looking at Brex, because we're a B2B company, as you probably know, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. We're able to apply new technology, new stack, to start doing things that you can do with legacy systems, right? It's not really well known, but a lot of the traditional banks don't even own their technology, right? They're outsourcing their technology. Right. We own our financial stack. So we can do things, with our financial primitives at the user level that very few other companies are able to do. For example, we do provide real-time underwriting, which allows us to really onboard you on an instant, which allows us to give you much better payment terms. Very few companies are able to do that. So that's just an example. But even like operating as a business with a mobile app, like the one that you have with Brex, is quite revolutionary today. It's not for a consumer, but it's starting to become the norm for a business. So yeah, I would agree with you that right now it's not so much the consumerization. I think that cloud is starting to give tools for businesses to start operating at the speed of what the consumers are used to.
Right. So a couple more questions for you. What has kind of surprised you in your first couple months on the job at this startup? Not the huge global Google, but a scrappy startup trying to change the world.
Yeah, I think the first thing that surprises you, which is normal, is like, look, you're in a much smaller outfit, so whatever you do, you can start seeing the impact immediately. And this is really, this is really exciting for me, right? You're pushing a button and you can see right away the outcome. You're hiring people and you can see right away the impact. So that's the first thing I would say would be the most, different from, being in a big company where your decisions might impact and you might be seen, but only 6 months to 9 months later. The second thing is like the speed. The speed of operations is obviously 10 times, 20 times faster than a big company. There's no bureaucracy, so this is really one thing that is like notable. On the contrary, what I would say you have to deal with is like you're a small outfit, so it's not like you have a ton of flexibility in terms of hiring people, in terms of having huge budgets, in terms of addressing what you want to do. So frankly speaking, it does require ruthless prioritization. And I think that's what makes startup successful. Is a successful startup is able to make the right priorities, say no and to some of the things that would be nice to do, and just focus on the very critical few that are really important. And that's where I think I'm back to Pedro and Enrique. They're amazing at having the intuition of what we should be doing month over month and quarter over quarter. And I think this is like the most surprising things for me, or the most different thing is like being able to make the right priority at the right time and sometimes you have to pivot again. But this is the most delicate balance that you have to make the startup.
And what excites you most about the future as you look ahead? You've been there a couple months. You obviously thought a lot about this company. What most excites you about this company's future and animates your day?
So what excites me is that our vision, which basically is to become the new financial operating system for growing businesses, is something that customers want us to do. So whenever I'm talking, as I started, at Brex, I spent my first month talking to, tens and hundreds of customers and partners. And what struck me was not only like customers were more like reacting like you, hey, we love your corporate card, we want you to do more. But as I explained what we wanted to do, which is like, we've introduced already a cash account. And so we have a corporate credit card. So you can see that we're able to start managing, helping you save, move, store your money faster and better, and automate the whole process. And they were like, well, this is exactly what we want, right? So what's exciting to me is to map our vision and to what the customers want and realize that what we are going to go deliver in the next couple of years is exactly what they want to see. The second biggest thing is I believe that by empowering those businesses, and mostly like growing SMBs, you're really transforming the way the world is working. You're really giving all these SMBs the true potential for them, to realize their dreams.
Yeah.
And to me, this is, being able to work in a B2B company and connect what you're doing to we can help SMBs achieve their dreams is very exciting.
It's incredible. As you talk, I hear the connection between cloud services, which enable businesses to do it, and what you're doing now, just from the technological platform to also a technological platform, but a financial platform.
It is, and I have to tell you, I didn't decide for Brex because I was making the connection. And sometimes, subconsciously, you're picking, you're making some choices, and then you realized afterwards that it was meant for you. But you're absolutely right. I think Brex is probably the incarnation of what you can do with cloud in a particular industry like the financial industry.
Yeah. This is exciting. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kent.
All right. This has been the Selling Investor podcast. Talk to you next time.